I'm Nolan Kirkman. I'm the Director of Development and Technical Services with the City of Burlington, and just want to welcome everyone this evening to our Maple Talks. Really good to have such a good crowd out, and just looking for a good night. So our format tonight is we're gonna have our lead consultant, Ernie Bauman. He is with Toole Design Group, and he is going to walk us through some information. And we also have some other folks that are going to speak. And so it's really about information to share with you folks about ideas about corridors, and also leading into our efforts. As you're all aware, we're beginning our corridor study on Maple Avenue. So we're very excited about that and what can come with that. And with that, I'm going to introduce Ernie Bauman with Toole Design Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Nolan. I want to reiterate Nolan's comments. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. This is a wonderful turnout. We're extremely pleased and happy to welcome you to Maple Talks. Again, my name is Ernie Bauman. I'm the Southeast Regional Director for Toole Design Group. Our Southeast office is located in Spartanburg, South Carolina, so about 3 hours to the west on I-85. And we're a national firm that specializes in complete streets. And we'll get into tonight, if you're not familiar with the term complete streets, we'll get into what that's all about this evening. We also have on our team Rose and Associates, which is a renowned market and economic analysis firm out of Davidson, North Carolina, right next door to Charlotte. And so Kathleen Rose will also be speaking this evening with me. And as Nolan alluded to, Maple Talks is a forum where we can share ideas with you. And then after the presentation, we will have some time out in the lobby with some refreshments where you can share ideas with us as well. So we definitely want this to be a dialogue tonight. I want to make sure that everybody received, there's a handout that has some information about the project. There's also a comment form that we'd love for you to fill out for us. There's a basket out on the table out in the lobby that you can drop these in when you head out that way. And please stay in contact with us. The website is Renew Maple Avenue. And so I do want to give you just a very brief idea about Renew Maple Avenue. I think everybody, you're here because you've heard about the exciting initiative that's going on for Maple Avenue. And it truly is going to be a very inspirational and aspirational trek that we're all going to take together as we try to put a vision together for what Maple Avenue can be, what it should be, and also give you the tools as a community on how to make that happen moving forward. So I want to be real clear. We haven't done really any kind of design work yet. We haven't made any recommendations yet because we want to talk with you first. We want to have a conversation with the community first. So what we're going to be talking to you about tonight, as Nolan mentioned, is a lot of sort of what we call best practice ideas about corridors and how to revitalize and redevelop them, and what folks are looking for today in a vibrant community setting. And so while these are not specific recommendations at this point, they are ideas to start getting us all kind of thinking about what could we do and what are other communities doing. So with that, I'll jump right in here. Let's see. So when we think about streets, for a very long time, streets were considered just some place that you drove your car. But as we really break it down and we begin to look at the different users of a street, it's much broader than just automobiles or trucks or buses. And we've got two groups of street users. One is a mobile group. So those would be folks that are driving cars, people that are walking, people that are biking. But we also have a static group of users. And these are the ones that often we forget about. Because we worry about, we got to move the cars through this street as quickly as possible. We got to get people to their destinations as quickly as possible. Well, we've got a lot of folks on a street that own property, own businesses, have homes, have made their lives on that street. And so we've got to recognize them as well when we do a project like a Renew Maple Avenue. And then you can see here at the bottom this idea of vulnerability. There's different degrees of vulnerability. So certainly if I'm driving a car, I'm much less vulnerable than if I'm walking along that street. Or if I'm the kids playing in the cul-de-sac, having doing a little hockey or a little basketball. So we want to make sure we're designing and thinking about those users from their vulnerability as well, and providing the correct facilities for them because of that. We also have changed the way we think about the capacity of a street. You can see here on your left that we've got the beaker full of cars. And for many, many years, that's the way we judge the capacity of a street. We said, how many cars can we move on this street? And really the way we should be looking at the capacity of a street is here on the right. All of these users need to have part of the street, and we need to have a balanced outlook on how to do that. And that doesn't mean that one has to be shortchanged over the other. It just means we need to balance those functions. So the approach we will be taking with Renew Maple Avenue is what we refer to as a great streets approach. And the idea here is that we don't want to design or think about just cars, or just bicyclists, or just pedestrians, or just people riding public transportation. We want to think about people. Rather than thinking about modes, we want to think about the people that are affected by Maple Avenue. And so, in that regard, those people may be driving a car. Those people may be riding a bike. They may be walking. They may be taking transit, but they also may live or work or own property along Maple Avenue. And we want to be careful to recognize that. For us, there's sort of a triple bottom line with that. We want a quality of design, so we want it to be attractive. We want it to look good and feel safe and comfortable. We also want a quality of service for transportation. So while we want it to be beautiful, we don't want it to be heavily congested. We don't want to be stuck in traffic. So we want to find a way to balance these items. And then finally, we want a quality of life for residents and users. We want it to be a vibrant place where people want to live and want to travel and want to visit. And really for us, the big question is, why can't the trip be as enjoyable as the destination? And so that's what we really want to focus on, is this great streets approach. One of the things we're also looking at is reaching a broader user base. For many, many years, we've looked at different users and we've tried to figure out how to put them in a street context. And bicyclists are one of the most vulnerable users in this context. And when you have varying incomes on a corridor like Maple Avenue, you have folks who may choose to ride a bike, but you also have people who have to ride a bike. They may not own a car. Maybe you cannot afford to own a car or be able to keep up with the maintenance of a car. And so therefore, we look at this, and you see that we've found nationally, we have done research, and there's different types of users of a bicycle. I think we've all seen the folks we might refer to as the spandex set. You know, the real road bicyclist who's hunkered down and flying on his bike, and he or she is probably going to bicycle anywhere. They're very confident, and we actually refer to them as the strong and confident. But you can see that experienced and confident is only 1% of people that ride bicycles in this country. And really what we're aiming for is that 60%, the interested but concerned. And those are the people like myself who I enjoy riding a bike. And I love to go ride a bike with my 11-year-old son and my 13-year-old daughter. But there's only certain places I'm going to do that. It needs to be a much lower stress environment. And so we want to think about how can we provide lower stress environments. So I just want to share with you a little bit. This video, it's a little shocking. Nobody gets hurt here, but you see these cars traveling along the main line, they have the green light. And so this SUV, he has every right to make that right turn unless there's someone in the crosswalk, because the folks in the crosswalk also have the green light. They have a walk. But you can see the way this street is designed, it has a very large turning radius, which allows that car to take that right turn at a very high speed. And when not watching, they almost had a very tragic accident here. And so I want to show you how nationally we're looking at redesigning streets to improve this type of situation. Let's see. You may have to advance it for me. Thank you. We're now designing what we refer to as protected intersections. And these intersections, they improve the geometry and the function of intersections for, again, all people, whether you're driving cars, riding bikes, walking. But you can see here in this intersection, we have this refuge island here that creates a different atmosphere. We also separate the bike lane off of the travel lane, which gives us better sight lines. And let me show you. This is the condition that has one of these. And see how slowly this car has to take that turn. And also imagine if there were a cyclist here, how they would be able to pick them up in their field of vision a lot easier. You can see here in the plan view, this car here, they're able to pick up these folks long before they're in their line. And so it's much safer condition. And so these are the types of things we want to look at, the ability to do. And again, as I mentioned, it's benefits for everyone. It slows the traffic speeds. It makes it very coherent where people belong. There's a place for the car, there's a place for the bicyclist, there's a sidewalk for the pedestrians. So everyone knows their zone and where they need to be. There's better visibility, there's improved sight lines, the geometrics are better. And really, there's a very clear understanding and expectations by everyone. So it takes away a lot of the surprise. Something else we're very concerned about is speed. A corridor like Maple Avenue, many times because we have 4, 5 lanes in places, speeds can get pretty high. And so these are not corridors that are incredibly safe for pedestrians because of that. And also, even from a vehicular crash, we can have much higher injury. So you can see here, this is something that a lot of people don't realize, is this idea of stopping distance. So if I'm doing 30 miles per hour in my car, and I realize that I need to stop, this first bar here is actually my reaction distance. So what that means is, from the time my mind tells my foot to go to the brake, I've traveled 33 feet, okay? And then once my foot does hit the brake, I'm going to travel another 57 feet before I actually stop, which is almost 100 feet between realizing I need to stop, whether that's a car that has stopped in front of me or whether it's a pedestrian that's come off the curb. And so then a lot of people think, well, then if I'm doing 60 miles per hour, I just double these numbers, right? No. It grows exponentially. You can see here at 60 miles an hour, it takes 66 feet just to react. And then it's another 216, so we're approaching 300 feet before we can stop. And this is why lower speeds are so important. From a pedestrian standpoint, they're extremely important too. If I'm a pedestrian and I get hit by a car that's doing 20 miles per hour, I have an over 80% chance of survival. Now, I don't want to get hit by a car, but I'd much rather get hit by one at 20 miles per hour than 40 miles per hour where it inverts and I have almost an 80% chance of death. And so again, this is why it's so important that when we're driving our cars, we obey speed limits in certain areas. Those speed limits are there for a reason, because of the environment in which we're in. The other thing to keep in mind is as speed increases, our actual cone of vision decreases. And what that means is, as a driver, you can see down here on this end, at 20 miles per hour, I see most everything out of my windshield. So you think about downtown environments where you're traveling at lower speeds, you usually see people coming off of sidewalks out of the corner of your eyes. But as the speed increases, that field of vision gets very narrow. And this is why if you're out on the interstate and a deer comes out of the woods, you don't pick that deer up till it's almost right in front of you. Because when you're doing 70, 80 miles per hour, your field of vision is very narrow and you're looking way down that road. And so this again is a reason why on these urban corridors where we're trying to revitalize, where we want people out, We want safe travel. We need to lower speeds, and we do that through design. So safety is a huge reason why we need to think about these types of projects. You can see here there was a report done by AAA called The Safety Benefits of Highway Infrastructure Investments. And they said that key roadway improvements could save up to nearly 74,000 lives a year and prevent, over a 20-year period, and prevent almost over 350,000 serious injuries just from road improvements. And what type of improvements are those? There's three of them that really relate to the Great Streets approach that we're talking about tonight. The first is converting intersections into roundabouts. Those would actually take care of nearly 30% of the safety benefits. Adding sidewalks and signalized pedestrian crossings would do another 20% of those safety benefits. And then finally, in more rural areas, and this is probably not applicable to Maple Avenue, but if we were to pave or widen shoulders, that would be 3% of the safety benefits. And that is good for cars and for pedestrians, because when we have wider shoulders in rural areas, it gives motorists the ability, a course correction. If you run off the road a little bit, you've got the ability to pull it back in. But also, if you're a pedestrian or bicyclist, you have somewhere to travel out of the travel lane. So there's safety benefits that are important as well. There's a national trend now in something that we call Vision Zero. And a lot of municipalities across the country are doing what we call Vision Zero. And the idea here is that all traffic deaths are preventable, either through better behavior or through design. And so there is this movement to let's move the needle to zero. And sometimes that sounds crazy. You say, well, how in the world could we ever prevent them all? Well, in South Carolina, the Department of Public Safety, they did a survey. They went out to parks around the state, and they just talked to people. And they asked them, how much do you think we ought to reduce traffic deaths? And of course, people said 20%, 30%, 50%. And then they asked them a different question. They said, how many traffic deaths are acceptable in your family? What do you think their answer was? 0. That's right. So when we begin to personify this, 0 doesn't sound so out of reach. It sounds like something we should be reaching for. And so we want to do this through good design. At this time, I'm going to ask Kathleen to come up. She's going to talk about the market and economic side of what we'll be looking at.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the new economy. What does that mean? So when we take a look at Burlington and we get into looking at the area from a broad perspective and then a very narrow perspective on Maple Avenue, we want to really start with what's going on in the greater economy, what's happening in terms of trends in various different uses that are going to impact how we look at what goes on in the back of the sidewalk at Maple Avenue. Ernie's team is going to work on the road and design, but we're going to take a look at what are the things that impact the back of the sidewalk. Many of the folks that we've talked to so far in this process, and we're here, as Ernie said, on a listening tour. We want to hear from you all as to what your thoughts and ideas are. But many folks had comments and concerns about not only the road itself, but what's happening on the back of the sidewalk in terms of the real estate uses. So we're going to look at real estate issues, we're going to look at economic development issues, and we're really going to look at land use issues as well as part of this process. So in the new economy, we have to think about, well, what are the trends, what's happening, and how's this going to impact us? So how many of you have shopped online in the last month? Okay, yeah, so statistically, 96% of people, Americans, have shopped online in their lifetime, 80% in the last month. And now over 50% of Americans shop online. So what is that? How does that impact our retail markets, and what do we do for shopping? And then how many of you work from home on occasion? Okay, some of you. Again, a full 34% of Americans work from home during some part of their business week or their business life. So all of those things are impacting where we work and how we live and how we shop and the things that we do. So when we start to look at the demographics of the community, first slide, there we go. We're going to really start from kind of 10,000 feet. How do we look at Burlington, and how does that compare to some of the other communities of a similar size throughout the Southeast? And how does that compare to our, communities that we're surrounded by? And then we take a look at some of these key facts, and many of these things you may know, is the population, this is from estimates of 2017, about 54,000 people. Average household size, we always used to say the United States average was 2.2 kids and a dog. Median age, 39. Well, in the United States and in North Carolina, it's a little closer to 37, 38. So we're a little, skewed toward the older side. But yet, as we look at some of these other things, like household income, and the next slide, please, is what about economic mobility? Economic mobility means your ability to get a job, and that relies on education. So, we have some work to do in that regard in terms of getting folks through high school so that they can be employable. And so those are some of the things that we're going to take a look at, and then bachelor degrees and professional degrees. That's important to our business community, and how do they find good employees and good workers? Next one, please. And so as we start to look at that, we're not only going to look at the folks that live in the community and how they experience it, but also how businesses experience the roadway. Maple Avenue is the gateway into your downtown and into your community. So that's important. Not only if you're shopping for a home, we all look for curb appeal, right? Well, if we're shopping for a business, we look for that same curb appeal. We want to be proud of how we bring our workers and our vendors and people into the community. So we want to take a look at that ratio of businesses, employees, and how can we get more people who live in the community to be able to actually work in the community and getting them job ready. Next one, please. And so again, what's interesting is we look at, even though we have a higher than average employment rate, we also notice that many folks in the community are in white collar employment. And most of our business and our physical plant base and the real estate is industrial real estate, yet most of the folks that live in the community work in white collar professions, which would indicate office types uses. So those are all the kinds of things that we take a look at. Next one, please. And so again, with income, median household income, per capita income, median net worth, these are things that are all important when we talk about that shopping and how that works. So we'll start to use some methodologies and formulas to help us understand how we're going to get to the answers as far as real estate uses go. Next one. The other thing that's interesting is that so many times we come in and we take a look at demographics, what's the age, what's the income, all of those things. But there's a new way of looking at things right now, and it's called tapestry or lifestyle segmentation. And lifestyle tells us about the lifestyle of folks in the community. That poster up there on the wall, and we'll put it in the back at the end of our session so you can look at it more closely, is a way that the demographers have depicted both demographic, economic, and social issues to put people into categories of lifestyle segmentation. And while folks that are looking for employees don't really look at this, the retail industry and the housing industry very much looks at it. They want to know where people hang out, what they like to buy, where they like to shop, what kind of entertainment they want, what kind of house do they want to live in. So these become important markers for us. And as you can see, there's a whole host of these segments across the United States. And in the city of Burlington, we find ourselves in 3 of the majority of the population. And by the way, even though we have an older median income, we still have a pretty good mix of Gen Y and Gen X. If I say, empty nester, what does that mean to most folks? It conjures up an image of their age, their socioeconomic status, etc. So lifestyle segmentation is a way for us to look at things differently in terms of behavior patterns. Next one, please. And so when we take a look at economic-based analysis, some of the things that we do are, I'll give you an example, and I'll pick on LabCorp since that's one of your biggest employers here. So if I'm meeting somebody who's just moved here and just got a new job at LabCorp, we take a look at business and industry in terms of basic employment. What does that mean? That means that their good or service is exported outside of the community, meaning everything that they do is not just utilized in the local environment. So, and anything beyond that is really a local service job, is what we call service employment. So that basic employment, to give you an example, is if Bob, for example, says, gee, he comes home and says, honey, and he's sitting in Texas somewhere, I just got a job at LabCorp, we're moving to Burlington. So what's going to happen? So from that new job, which exports its good or service outside of the community, what's the first thing they're going to do? We're moving to Burlington. We're going to buy a house, right? So then they come and buy a house. On the next slide, please, or the next point, yeah. So when they buy the house, they're going to move to Burlington, and what are they going to do? If they follow the average of 2.2 kids and a dog, we've got to put the kids in school. Are they going to leave their money in Texas? No, they're going to bring it and they're going to put it in the bank, and then they're going to find the doctor and the dentist and have to go shopping, right? Because they have to buy all the stuff to put in the house. So all of that increases the total employment. Now, employment is the basis for which we look at real estate. So the folks that work for a living are going to be impacted by this whole dynamic, and they're going to be either in office space or industrial space or other kinds of space. And if you hit the next one, please, what happens is then when that family moves here, it's increased your population. And we've seen population growth happen in Burlington, haven't we? And so what happens is when that population grows, then we have a need for housing as we have folks moving here, whether or not they need a job. And many folks come here first as a visitor, right? They came to interview for the job, they came to visit and decided, gee, we want to live here. So all of those dynamics help create the drive for total population and housing. And then once they come and bring their money, the next one please, then they're bringing their money and their income. And so the last thing is saying to us, the very next one please, is saying, now that creates a total demand. So this is where we have all of these land uses that we have to take into consideration, and it's driven by job and population and income growth. And so those are the kinds of things we're going to be looking at as far as the dynamics here. Next one. So what we have to do is take all that information and all that data, and then we have to take all of your input from all the things that we hear from your wish list of what you'd like to see, what you hope to see, how you want things to change or not change. And then we have to take that along with the market reality and then start to put that into a program and a strategy for the design team to say, how do we design the street? How do we design the back of the napkin, if you will? And so we have to take all that data and put it in the other side of our brain and create design. And that's where we'll start to take a look at how does that impact housing and what do we need to look at there? Do we have enough housing choice and enough opportunities for different folks and different economic strata, as well as different family dynamics, singles versus families versus seniors, that all have different needs and wants. Whoops. Happened. Anyway, and the office and the shopping and the last thing is when we take a look at economic development, one of the things we don't often think about is tourism, and tourism is important. As I mentioned, that new employee was really first a visitor. So it's not just visitors that are passing through, going to an event and staying at a hotel, but many of them are your future residents and your future business owners, etc. So with that, we're going to take a look at how do we continue to take all that information and blend it into making great places. And for that, I'll turn it back over to Ernie.
Thanks, Kathleen. So that's sort of one half of the market piece, but there's also a certain type of community that a lot of folks want to live in. And so we look at the land uses, but we also look at the way a street and the way a community is created. And just a couple of years ago, the American Planning Association, which is the fraternity of city planners across the U.S., they did a study called Investing in Place. And it was actually aimed at all demographics, but they took a particular interest in millennials and what they called active boomers. So these were baby boomers that were active, that wanted to be doing things, that wanted to have an active lifestyle. And what they found from these individuals was that 56% of millennials and 46% of active boomers prefer to live in a walkable community, no matter where it was located. It could be an urban environment, a suburban environment, or a rural environment. They also found that 2/3 of all respondents, so this is across all generations, said, and actually in 3/4 of millennials, believe that investing in schools transportation choices in walkable areas is a better way to grow the economy than recruiting companies. So this is how important it is to people that we have walkable communities. And in fact, in this same study, what is interesting about millennials, this is a generation that we want to attract to our communities, because this is where the jobs are right now with a lot of millennials. They have a lot of disposable income. They are the driving force behind many economies today. It also told us that half of them right now are willing to move somewhere in the next 5 years. So the reality is that if your community has what they want, in the next 5 years, half of them are going to move to that community. So that's important. It's not just the American Planning Association. It's also, whoops, well, that was quick. Can we go back? Keep headed back. Yes. I have no surprises now. Boy. And now you'll know how long you have to sit here. All right. So also the Urban Land Institute, which is one of the largest developer fraternities in the country, did a similar study where they looked at America in 2015, and they saw that of all Americans, again, regardless of generation, that 52% would like to live in a place where they do not need to use a car very often. So again, we're seeing this theme of walkable communities, and that's something we want to take interest in as we look at Maple Avenue. Also, interesting statistics on driver's licensure nationally. You know, when I was growing up, when probably a lot of you were growing up, getting your driver's license was a rite of passage, and you couldn't wait until you could get that permit and then finally that driver's license. Well, things are a little different now. Folks are waiting longer to get driver's licenses. I know I have a 19-year-old niece who didn't get her driver's license till she was over 17. She was already 17 years old till she decided to do that. And to me, that seems crazy, but this is where the generations are. You can see these charts. The blue lines are 1983, the red lines are 2008, and the green lines are 2010. And you can see in almost every demographic up to almost 40 years old, it's lower now than it was back in 1983. You see some higher trends in older folks. There's a lot of reasons for this, and a lot of reasons why millennials in particular, our younger generation, aren't getting their licenses quickly. You can see them here. Certainly car insurance, parking is expensive. They prefer to walk, bike, or ride transit. There's this thing now called the sharing economy, where you can get an Uber or a Lyft, and it's very easy and convenient. And even in small markets, this is available because it's a shared economy where anyone can get in on this. Telecommuting, as Kathleen mentioned, some environmental concerns, different priorities. One thing I do like to caveat on this, though, is that also millennials are coming out of college today with a lot more debt than many of us had. And so in many instances, millennials already have a car payment, but it's called a student loan. In fact, some millennials are coming out of college today with a mortgage payment called a student loan. And so that is also a factor in why they may not be buying cars as much or buying homes as quickly. And so that's important to realize as well. I always like to compare locally. So those were national figures. These are actually North Carolina figures for driver's licensure. And you can see that 19 and under with a driver's license, nationally 51% of 19 and under have a driver's license. Here in North Carolina, it's only 40%. So that phenomenon is even greater here of folks waiting. And in fact, my niece that I mentioned, she lives in Charlotte, so she's contributing to that number. The 20 to 34-year-olds, it's a little different story. Nationally, 20 to 34, 86% have a driver's license, and here in North Carolina, it's 89%. So right about on par with average there. But again, always like to look a little more locally than those national figures when we can. Even the heads of car companies are realizing this. This is the head of global consumer trends at Ford Motor Company. I don't think car buying for millennials will ever be what it was for boomers. In fact, just yesterday, I was talking with a colleague of mine who was a baby boomer, and he was talking to me about getting car fever. And he said, he goes, you know, about every 4 or 5 years, I feel like I got to go buy a new car. I want a new car. And that's something that a lot of millennials just can't relate to. And so it's just interesting how the generations have different perspectives on things, but we have to be cognizant of that as we're looking at the market and also as we're designing. Millennials' trip decisions. 45% are consciously replacing driving with other modes. So what this means is they are making a choice to do this as well. This was a study done called Transportation of the New Generation, and you can see here that between 2001 and 2009, there were 24% more taking bike trips, 16% walk trips, and 40% more taking public transit. And that's why the link system here in Burlington is so important. Not only do you need it for folks who have to have it to get to their jobs or place of employment, but there are many, many people who would rather take public transportation than have to maintain and own an automobile. This is actually from another plan that was done in Gastonia. It was a pedestrian plan, but I thought it was a great quote. Whether out of necessity or choice, living in a community where walking or biking to the store, work, or church is a viable option makes life easier and more enjoyable. So communities in North Carolina are embracing this. Economic impact. So why should we be more walkable? Again, many times, especially if you talk to maybe your council members, you want to know what's the return on investment in this sort of thing. Obviously, to be a more walkable community, to be a more bikeable community, we have to invest some money to do that. So what's our return? Well, here are some national statistics. There is a protected bike lane that was put in New York City, and I know that Burlington's not New York City, but I want to give you just a feel here. 49% increase in retail sales and 49% fewer commercial vacancies after that bike lane went in. Broad Avenue bike lanes in Memphis, Tennessee, so I'm getting a little closer to Burlington with my examples here. 16 new businesses and 29 new property renovations once those bike lanes went in. Portland, Oregon say that people arriving on bike spend the most per month of any type of customer. And that is true nationally. People who ride bikes have bigger wallets, apparently. I don't know where they put them on the bike, but they apparently do, because nationally they spend more money on average than people who drive cars. And then the Monon Trail in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I've actually had the privilege of riding this trail. It's a wonderful trail that runs through neighborhoods. It connects neighborhoods to restaurants and retail, and it's just a marvelous facility. This is actually a picture of it down here. Had 11% higher property values within 1 mile of that trail. So again, this is important stuff. It's not just about I want to walk, or I want to bike, or I want to be able to travel in a different manner. This means money. This is money to communities. It's also individual economic benefits. You can reduce your household expenses. For folks who are dependent on bicycle or pedestrian travel, it increases their job opportunities, because when they can safely get on a bike and go somewhere, it increases the distance that they can look for employment. And then if they combine that with transit, they can go even further, because they can ride their bike to a transit station or a bus stop, get on that bus, go somewhere else, maybe ride their bike a little further, and it really increases those job opportunities for them. It also gives you more discretionary income, because again, as we all know, owning and maintaining a car takes a lot of money to do that. And so that's reduced healthcare costs. Obviously, there's a great healthcare benefit because you're actually being active when you walk and bike. And then finally, all of these 4 top things here lead to improved upward mobility. And again, this is especially true of our lowest income folks, because again, if they can find better work, if they can save money by not having to have an automobile, if they can save on healthcare costs, then all of that means they can more quickly rise through upward mobility. So that's all very important. Other things, there's something called a walk score, and you can go online and you can put the address of your home into this website, and it will give you your walk score. It will tell you how walkable is the place where you live. And essentially, what walk score tells us is that there is a $700 to $3,000 property value increase for each additional point on walk score. So if you can take it from a 50 to a 51, your property values go up by this much. So that's incredible. And doesn't take a lot to do that. It doesn't take a lot to move that needle. So just imagine if Maple Avenue suddenly was a very walkable and bikeable corridor, those property values would begin to increase very rapidly. Let's see. Send me back one. There we go. Also on healthcare, $5.6 billion could be saved in healthcare costs nationally if only 1 in every 10 started a regular walking program. That's incredible. That's only 10% of people deciding that they're going to walk regularly every day. And so if we could walk for transportation, then we kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. We get to go somewhere and do something we need to do, and we also get more healthy because of it. Finally, I wanted to share a couple of examples a little closer to home. What we did was we looked up and down the I-85 corridor, and we wanted to talk to Burlington about some comparable cities. And in North Carolina, on the I-85 corridor, there aren't a lot of comparable places as far as your population size. And so we had to tiptoe into my kind of home area in South Carolina on the I-85 corridor. And Greenville, South Carolina, which most people are familiar with, Greenville has gone through a tremendous renaissance over the last 35 to 40 years. They have done some great work, and what we wanted to just show you was the return on investment in doing things that not only beautify streets, but make them more walkable, attractive places for business. And so Greenville's West End District, it was back in the late 90s, Greenville's West End District was somewhere you just didn't go. It was a high crime area, very derelict property owners, just in very disrepair, and it was a part of town where even police officers weren't comfortable being. And Greenville said, let's put some investment into that. Let's see what we can do here. And so what they did was they began not only what we call a streetscape program, where you beautify the streets, you add the sidewalks, you put in street trees, you get the lighting, but they did some other investments. And so what they did was they put what we call a TIF district in place, and that's a tax increment financing district. And the idea behind that is you look at it, you put a boundary around a certain area, and you say, what is the tax base today? And so let's just say, for instance, the tax base was $100,000. Well, then you say, over a certain period of time, might be 10 years, might be 20 years, any increase in that tax base, we're going to reinvest it into the district. So essentially, if the tax base rises to $500,000, we're going to take $400,000 and do more things in the district. We're going to keep the original 100 that we had, but we're going to take that new and reinvest. And so in this West End TIF district, you can see the line tracking here of how it has increased. And I want to show you what happened here. So first, in 2003, they did what they called Streetscape Phase 1. It was several blocks where they improved the sidewalks, they widened sidewalks, they put in street trees, they had benches, lighting, on-street parking, things that would beautify the area. And you can see that actually the revenue was going down at this point. Well, then they did what is known as Falls Park. And Falls Park was a pretty incredible project. It was a beautification project, but it was actually the Reedy River runs through Greenville. And at that time, there was a road called Camperdown Way that actually covered the river. If you went to downtown Greenville, you didn't even know there was a river. And if you happened to find the river, you'd also find couches and old tires and just a bad scene. So they uncovered the river essentially. They took out the road and they built Falls Park, which again was a high dollar public investment. And you can see those revenues were still kind of going down. But then they did something, they put in West End Field. And this again was another public investment, but this was a minor league baseball stadium. It is a replica of Fenway Park in Boston. And the Greenville Drive plays there, which is a farm team of the Boston Red Sox. And that, you can see, kind of started the turning point. And then they came in with Streetscape Phase 2. They did a few more blocks of this streetscape improvement. And you can see from there, things just took off. And between that point and where they were in 2012, they had a 165% increase in property taxes. So you can see that you have to put some investment into it. But once you get to a critical point, it will start paying those returns. The other example I wanted to show you is from my hometown of Spartanburg, South Carolina, also on the I-85 corridor. And this is downtown Spartanburg. In 2013, the City Council made a decision to invest in walkability and bikeability in downtown. And they dedicated $2.3 million to doing these pedestrian and bike safety and safety enhancements. And essentially what they did was that you can see on the map here the various lines. They spread it out all through downtown. But that was done in 2000. Let's go back one. There we go. That was done in 2013, $2.5 million of public investment. And since then, $150 million of private investment has been announced in the downtown. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there's a one-to-one correlation on that. There's a lot of other things going on behind the scenes. But certainly this investment, and what I want you to know is only about half of this money has been spent so far of the $2.5 million. So just the fact that the council dedicated the money and said we're going to do this made developers and investors say, okay, we're now ready to put some money in your downtown. And so it's been very exciting. And so with that, that is everything we have for you this evening on this end. We really do appreciate you coming out. Again, this is the beginning of this conversation. We've got some refreshments outside. We want you to, if you haven't filled out those comment forms, please do that for us and put them in the basket. Kathleen, myself, Daniel and Jared, also from our team, as well as city staff, we're going to be out in the lobby. We're happy to chat with you one-on-one. We also understand that if you need to head on out this evening, that's okay too. But we're happy to spend some time with you. And again, we want you to know this is just the beginning. In fact, in October, we are planning to do a workshop where we'll actually get over some maps and some drawings with you and actually begin designing some things, looking at what can we do together to improve Maple Avenue. But again, thank you for coming out. We appreciate your participation, and I look forward to chatting with you outside. Thank you.